Welcome to The Blue Dot, Northern Kentucky's premier political podcast, brought to you by the Kenton County Democratic Executive Committee. Welcome back to The Blue Dot podcast for our weekly roundup, where we bring you all the news you need to know in 10 minutes or less. Thanks for joining. I'm Natalie MacDonald.
And I'm Brian Koehl. It's been another busy week, and the lesson for this week is your voice matters. Once again, the power of the people on a grassroots local level has incited change in the Trump administration's approach and key personnel involved in the deportation debacle taking place in Minneapolis.
Yeah, Brian, there is a lot of local stuff to cover, and we will get to that. But I think a lot of our listeners are really invested in this piece of national news because of the shared empathy and heartbreak this country is enduring. But like you said, the power of the people was really amplified this week, and the Trump administration was forced to put the mega train in reverse after we, the people, stood up and said, enough is enough.
Yeah, and thank goodness for all the people who have had their cameras rolling to document all of these events, without which the DHS, the president, the VP, the U.S. Border Patrol commander at large, the FBI, and everyone else in the MAGAverse could continue to stand in front of the American people and lie. But because of so many peaceful protesters and observers, there was no ambiguity in showing that Alex Preddy was murdered.
Yeah, and that outcry was hard to ignore. And of course, every Democrat across the spectrum spoke out. But then we saw some cracks in the Republican response. So Vice President Pence, local legislators Massey and Savannah Maddox are just a few of the Republicans who released a statement in support of Minneapolis or against the specific actions of ICE.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure these Republicans really are troubled by the brutal murder of Preddy, shot 10 times in cold blood by ICE and Border Patrol agents. But what really got them fired up and speaking out against this atrocity were comments by Trump, Kash Patel, and other members of the administration, citing that Preddy, a licensed concealed carry gun owner who had his weapon holstered on his belt that day, should have expected trouble or maybe even brought it on himself because he was legally carrying his firearm. I mean, holy crap. The Second Amendment crowd nearly lost its mind over these statements.
Yeah, exactly. And Minnesota is an open carry state. So Preddy was following the letter of the law. And I think the Kentucky Republicans were probably looking for a way to do what is right and speak out. And that Second Amendment issue gave them that off-ramp that they needed. And Rand Paul took a more aggressive approach, and he has called for top immigration officials to testify before Congress, which is really a bold step for a Republican, although it's kind of a no-brainer for anyone else.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that hearing does happen. We need to force accountability from the leaders of this deportation nightmare. And by the way, I tried to find if any of our other local Republican representatives made any statements about the Preddy incident, but I didn't see anything from Representatives Banta, Moser, Dietz, or Doan, or from state senators McDaniel, Williams, or Fromeyer. Crickets.
Yeah, they were just kind of like staying out of it. However, Andy Barr doubled down on it all. So I think we know which direction he'll be going on in this midterm election. We got a sneak peek into how he'll be running his campaign.
Yeah, and you know what? I looked at some of the responses to his Facebook post, and maybe that direction will be heading back home, which is something we can all hope for.
Absolutely,
not a lot of popularity there in that statement by Andy Barr.
Yeah,
and there's a ton of finger pointing going on right now. Trump and Miller are trying to distance themselves, while chief liar and cosplay propagandist Kristi Noem is saying everything I've done in office was directed by President Donald Trump and senior advisor Stephen Miller. They're all working to be the driver of the bus instead of under it.
Yeah, and Kristi Noem's probably right. She probably is following the direction of those two individuals. And
absolutely.
If it wasn't also horrific, I'd say grab your popcorn. This is going to be fun to watch. But, it's horrific. And the good news is it certainly seems that the voices of reason did win this round because U.S. Border Control Commander at Large, or small, and Greg Bobino's case was ousted. And Trump sent in his border czar, Thomas Homan, who really isn't totally insane. And right now, by comparison, he actually looks like a steady hand to go into Minnesota and get all of this under control. And it also looks like Kristi Noem is in timeout for the moment. So yeah, I consider this a win for sure.
Yeah, I'm not one who believes in giving a gold star to people for putting out the fires they started, but I'm happy to see some attempts at de-escalation.
Yeah, we'll have to take that win. as it comes. But moving into more local news, we also got a sneak peek into how our Congressman Thomas Massey will be running his campaign. He released a new commercial attacking his Trump endorsed challenger, Ed Gallerin. And can you guess what Massey focused on in this commercial, Brian?
Hmm. His plan for healthcare, jobs, infrastructure, and education?
No, nice try, Brian. Instead, he resurrects Kamala Harris's woke America. And
Uh,
in 30 seconds of this $100,000 plus ad buy, he shows scary pictures of DEI in rainbow colors, where he
oh,
said his challengers showed films of transgender people advocating gender transitions,
oh
and his
no.
challengers, backed by pro transgender creeps, donated millions of money to their activism. And then, in more rainbow blocked letters, he ends by saying, "Woke Eddie will fight for they, them, but not us." So it looks like this is what we'll be up against, the same old gaslighting and the greatest hits of false attacks against marginalized people, rather than what he plans to do to help we, the people of his district. So this is what we're going to be
Yeah.
up against again.
Yeah. I had read a while back that the Republicans, for some reason, decided that anti transgender rights was the right message to run on in 2026. And here we are. And well, I suppose they have to run on fear and falsehoods because they sure can't run on actually serving the people. The Kentucky House Republicans finally released their budget, in which they propose severe cuts to or freezes on many expenditures and underfunding essential public services. The apparent goal in doing this is to trigger more income tax cuts under the legislature formula.
Yeah, and when you take a closer look, there's a lot to dive into here, but when just off the top, it shorts funding for school transportation by $120 million a year. And it freezes the SEEK base, which is the Support Education Excellence in Kentucky program, which is a formula driven allocation of state provided funds to local schools in Kentucky. And it also includes transportation costs and costs for special needs students. So it does that. And it also guts other parts of the K through 12 school funding, as well as higher education institutions by $330 million. And what this does is just
Mm.
continue a 20-year pattern of allowing school funding to fall further behind the cost of living. So we just keep falling further and further behind.
Yeah, it's really tragic, and there's a lot to dig into at this budget, especially with so many cuts to education. And I don't want to get too statistical, but with those seat transportation costs being cut 40 million from their 2026 levels for both upcoming 2027 and 2028, that means school buses are funded at only 74% of what is required by law.
That's really unbelievable. It really is hard to believe. But wait, there's more. This budget provides no additional funds for teacher and school employee raises. And it also does not increase funding for preschool, which remains
No,
at its
we don't need that.
2019 level.
Yeah,
You know?
we, yeah, we don't need to pay teachers. We don't need,
No. And then there's also no dedicated money for textbooks and teacher professional development. So, it just really hits education really hard.
Yeah, and as if attacking education isn't enough, they are also attacking another huge kitchen table topic that concerns Kentuckians, healthcare. Their plan leaves an unexplained shortfall of over 800 million in Medicaid funding and reduces funding for community-based services by nearly 100 million, all without explaining how new costs being passed down from the federal government will be covered.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And I think this is where then we're going to see some of these hospital closures and people really being affected by all of this.
That's right.
And all of this is in opposition to the governor's plan, which did address these issues. But, Republicans are going to be Republicans, slash and cut to make room for more income tax for those who simply just don't need it.
Yeah. And even while these cuts are made, the House budget leaves unappropriated the $3.7 billion in the Budget Reserve Trust Fund. In contrast, Governor Beshear proposed using $500 million of that fund to address general affordability and infrastructure needs, kind of what that fund is there for. There's a
Exactly.
ton more to unpack out of that budget, but those are the highlights. I mean, we only have 10 minutes.
That's right, Brian. And our 10 minutes are up. So with that, we'll conclude your Blue Dot Weekly Roundup, where the news is fast and the facts are free. Until next time, stay curious, keep the facts in focus, and never stop fighting for what matters. Peace out, everyone.